Welcome to the Life in the Red podcast presented by the Lincoln Journal-Star, your source for Husker news, analysis, and more. From football in the fall to recruiting in the summer, we've got you covered. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Basnett, Parker Gabriel, and Stephen M. Sipple.
Hold on, I got some problems. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Welcome in, Life in the Red podcast. We've all got some problems today. Sipple more than others. I'm Chris. There's Steve.
Come on.
Come on. It's 10:11 a.m. here on Friday, April 15th. We're going a little early today. We've got some other obligations we need to tend to. We're going to talk some spring ball, kind of wrap that up. Some questions that we need to answer looking ahead. We'll talk a little recruiting. We'll talk a little baseball. We'll get you out of here. We'll keep it tight here on a Friday for you. We know you have a lot of plans. We don't want to keep you for a long time. So let's get right into it. Spring game was last Saturday. We didn't learn a whole lot. My dog's hacking up a lung right now.
We've all got problems.
We all got problems. Didn't learn a whole lot, especially in the first half with the format. I guess I'll turn it over to the experts here. You know, coming out of what we saw on Saturday, what are maybe some questions that you guys have that you guys want to get answered going forward here?
Go ahead, Pete. Yeah, obviously there's a lot. I don't know how many of the questions we went into spring ball with, or more pertinently, the coaching staff went into spring ball with, have been answered just lock, stock, and barrel. And that's probably to be expected to some degree because of the amount of change that's happening in the program. Like, I think obviously we talk a lot about 4 offensive coaches and all of that, but the thing that I keep thinking this, and I think it's really true. Like, you're talking about 4 new coaches and a new play caller on offense with a new quarterback and a bunch of new guys who you're counting on for production. You're talking about probably up to 7 new starters on defense. And you're talking about a new guy in charge of special teams and sort of a revamped approach on that, not to mention new specialists across the board. So like there's a lot of change. And I just think it's sort of, you can go as macro or as micro as you want on the questions that are left. How is the offensive system going to sort of pull together here now over the summer after a spring that was heavy on install and light on, fine detail? How are they going to supplement the depth on the defensive front? What kind of jump is the offensive line really going to make once games start? I think there's a lot of questions left. We learned some over the course of spring ball, or we think we learned some, but there's plenty of work left to be done before they get on the plane to go to Ireland. Yeah, here's what I find fascinating. Think about this now. Think about the early spring and how much the conversation now contrasts, and how much even the facial expressions and mood contrast. So early it was what? Oh, this is cool. Look at all these new dudes. It was exciting, right? There's we talked about an injection of energy. Okay. Now what's happened, as in my mind, as the spring has gone on, there's a reality that's set in, and it's not quite as fun. It's not, oh man, this is new and exciting. Now every day that goes by that approaches August 27th, the tension increases. And I think it's increased. I think after spring ball that everybody understands, whoa, this is, you just went through it all. I don't even need to go through it. You just went through it. That's a lot.
Yeah.
And they gotta rip it, or they gotta get it right quick. And they came out of spring with still a lot of questions. So God, my God, my first 2 weeks, not my first week of August, those first 2 weeks of August in camp, I feel like they have to be the best 2 weeks of Scott Frost's life.
Yeah.
Because you got about 2 weeks before you really get into, okay, you got a game to prepare for. So you got about 2.5 weeks of camp where you got to get yourself right. And then it's, okay, we got a team in front of us now. So the time is really of the essence, as it always is.
I
I think you can look at the other side of the coin on that, especially on offense, and say they're a long way from being a finished product. But I don't know. I don't know. But I think it would be maybe overstepping to say that categorically that they're a long way from where the principals expected them to be at this point, right? I mean, they might be on track. I mean, Mark Whipple's done this a lot of times in his career where he's come into a new place as a play caller and a leader of the offense. And there is not an overnight way to teach guys a system and get them comfortable. And especially with quarterbacks, get them comfortable playing the way that Mark Whipple wants them to play against all the different defenses you're going to see and all of that. Now, that's part of the reality of being in such a state of change. But he talked about how this spring, I mean, it's not like he really changed his tenor from the beginning of spring ball to the end. It's not like at the beginning of spring ball, he was like, hey, we're going to rock and roll and this is going to be lights out from the start. And then at the end, he was talking about, well, let's just not turn the ball over and all of that. I mean, he's really sort of managed the expectations of his quarterbacks from the beginning and of the offense from the beginning and said, we're going to lay down as much as we can over spring ball. And then basically it's on you guys to go refine it on your own this summer. And then that process continues when camp starts. So it's, people are going to want, I think fans are going to want some semblance of clarity between now and late August, but I'm just telling you, like, it's not coming. I mean, you're not really going to know what this team has until the bullets start flying for real.
Might not know for a few games into the season, right? Like, because it'll change dramatically from game 1 to game 2. Like, you figure out what works, what doesn't, figure out what guys can do, what they can't. Like, you talk about getting clarity, like, leading into the first game. They might not have clarity till, like, game 3, game 4, and they don't really have time for that.
Right.
I mean, no, but it's a situation they're in. So, yeah, they got a long way to go, Sip. You're right. It's kind of hit me here as we're sitting here talking about it. Like, there's a lot they have to figure out, and there's going to be a lot that they can't figure out until August 29th or whenever that game is. So, yeah, you would have to think that reality has kind of started to hit these guys in the face a little bit.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, it's
fun for us.
It's super interesting. And the summer months before August are critical too. And it's hard to get a real good handle on that picture. I know it won't be, hey, the coaches aren't just going to say, okay, guys, just go do what you do. We'll see on July 31st. It can't be that. They'll work with them. I think they get 20 hours a week with them. If I were them, I'd push that. And I would, and keep close tabs on what's going on. I think they have to use the summer as almost like you have spring camp and then you have the traditional fall camp. I would treat it like, okay, we're gonna have a kind of a summer camp too here that is unofficial.
I think I don't remember the exact rule, Sipple, but I think it's 8 hours a week. 6 of them in the weight room, and then 2 of them.
Yeah, 20 is actually what they get now. You're right.
Yeah, right.
8. God, 8. It's got to be. Yeah, that's not.
But the thing about that, they should just flagrantly break the rules. Is probably.
I would flagrantly push it to about 18 to 20. Yeah.
But what they do,
36.
Yeah. Just
I
like
would
40.
encourage no summer classes. What are you doing in summer?
Or at least don't go. At least don't. If you can be in summer
like
classes,
sign up for the
go.
classes and just don't go. Like,
Yeah.
We'll have some people take the time.
Just have someone else do the work.
That's never backfired spectacularly for any program at any level of college athletics.
They got to
have NIL money. You can hire somebody to do your work now. Just do that.
And if you don't have the money, we'll just give you a little bit. It's fine. It's fine.
Try to get the analysts involved in terms of the on-field coaching and just. I do think what ends up happening though is that like that's part of the reason why, especially on offense, they structured the spring the way they did. Right, is to give the guys who are going to be leaders on offense as much of a baseline knowledge of the sort of core tenets as possible, so that they can work on their own on that stuff and have what Mark Whipple called a library of film and information to try to build off of over the summer. And then they can spend as much time. I mean, if you're Casey Thompson or if you're Trey Palmer or if you're Kamonte Grimes or Heinrich Harburg, you can spend as much time as you want in the facility over the summer. And the guys who are the off-field staffers, GAs, and analysts and all, like they can talk with those guys in the meeting rooms as much as they want. They can only have so much, on-field instruction with the coaches, but there's nothing that says that, Casey Thompson and Chubba Purdy and Logan Smothers and Austin Whipple can't sit in the film room any night of the summer and go over stuff. So they got to be, it's not just pick up where you left off when camp starts in late July. You got to be pretty far ahead of where you're at right now.
Yeah. And that's what I was saying. And thanks for the correction on the 20. Yeah. 8 that sounds more correct.
So what do you think, then just briefly before we transition to recruiting, I mean, what do you think about what did you make of what you saw? I don't know. It's hard to say even what you saw in the spring game from the defense, but what do you make of sort of where they're at on that side of the ball, Sipple? I mean, you heard Garrett Nelson talk about the standard and sort of picking up where they left off, even though they've lost a bunch of guys.
Scott alluded to something I thought was interesting. That is the pass rush had been pretty good throughout the spring. And I thought during the spring game, that was one element that you could sort of, that was a takeaway, I thought. I thought those edge guys, Garrett Nelson, Jamari Butler, those two in particular, they look good. And really what you saw, Baz commented on it during the game, was the pocket breaking down a lot. I mean, that's always there's always good news, bad news discussions when it comes to spring games. The good news is the pass rush did look pretty formidable. And Scott said he alluded to that being a constant during the spring. So that's one takeaway. And I do think, that's without O'Shawn Mathis. I mean, if you add O'Shawn Mathis and that part of the TCU, former TCU player who's in the portal, you add that and maybe that even looks better than it did on Saturday. But I mean, Garrett Nelson, I think, has become a pretty good player. I think he's made himself into I'd say a good to good plus Big Ten player. And that's one big takeaway.
They get Casey Rogers back too, healthy over the summer. And one of the things that they've talked about for years, and I've talked to Casey about this too, is like, it's one thing to have, you got to have edge rushers, but man, the best, watch the NFL any given weekend, like the best pass rush units, they get pressure from the interior too. Yeah. And so that's where, that's where when some dudes. Yeah, you just got it. Yeah. So that's where, like it's good to have that, sort of seems like a budding core of edge guys and maybe a nice, set of 4, or if you get O'Shawn Mathis, 5 that can go a little bit from the edge. And then one of the questions that I think is still unanswered is, what does that interior defensive line look like? You're going to get Casey Rogers back, but you're asking a lot of him and Ty Robinson. Nash Hutmacher got a lot of penetration, looked like a big, strong, explosive guy during the spring game, but you've also got it. It's a tough duty to be a young guy. And it's one thing to push a guy in the backfield, then you got to make a play, or you got to make it count. So that progression, we've talked about it a lot, but that's going to be key, I think, right? They've got some talent. They've got some depth at the linebacker level. They've got talent and competition, if not clarity in the secondary. But man, you got to find a way to be good at the line of scrimmage if you're gonna be a solid to good Big Ten defense.
Yeah, tell me you guys don't get jacked up when a guy drops back to pass and the pocket starts collapsing and he gets happy feet and it gets a little weird in there. And
I get jacked. I'm jacked just hearing you talk about it.
I like it when those big dudes start swiping at the ball. Their arms are going over the offensive lineman, and that's one of the coolest parts of football. Like a pump block, super cool.
One of my favorite pictures in the history of Nebraska football is from the Orange Bowl, where they played Tennessee and Peyton Manning's in the pocket, and it's exactly that. It's Grant Wistrom's got his arms up, and there's about 3. Yeah. He's just like he's about to get closed in on it. It's a great photo.
Those are great parts in games. The crowd gets kind of crazy, and
it's kind of like when a 3-point shooter gets gets hot and he catches the ball in a basketball game, and everybody kind of starts going, "Oh,
yeah, exactly.
Sipple stands up in the press box and yells, "Sack lunch!"
Sack lunch!" Beating on the glass.
Yeah, sack lunch.
I've never done that.
Turkey club, my sack lunch.
That would be something that I would expect more of.
You do occasionally literally bring a sack lunch to the press box, though, so that you got that kind of flavor.
I respect the hell out of that, by the way.
That's true. Yeah. Well, I get hungry. Those games are 5 hours long.
I know, it's a day. It's a day.
Okay. What else? What else?
Little recruiting. There's a massive recruiting weekend. And we don't throw the word massive around lightly. There was a ton of guys at this game, and everybody wants to focus on Dylan Raiola and Holden babies and all that sort of stuff. But man, they had dozens and dozens and dozens of guys at this game over the weekend, and on campus too.
Parker, 100 plus recruits on hand.
Yeah, it was there was just in terms of volume and in terms of quality. Honestly, I mean, they had big groups of players that have scholarship offers from Georgia, from Chicago, from Louisiana. They had almost every signee, I think, that is already in the program, but isn't here for spring ball. So you're like guys like DeColdis Crawford, Janiram Bonner, Emmett Johnson, the running back. So yeah, sort of across the spectrum. O'Shawn Mathis, who we've already talked about, was the lone official visitor. He subsequently said he'll be making his decision at the end of April, probably between Nebraska and Texas on that. The two schools we know he's visited this spring. Nebraska, his only official, took an unofficial to Texas a few weeks ago. And then just a whole bunch more, there's a defensive lineman from Georgia, 2023 kid named Josh Horton, who's a 6'5" and 290, who had really good things to say about his visit, put Nebraska in his top group, is going to commit soon. Feels like Nebraska is at least in contention there. Wide receivers and running backs. And I just had guys from sort of across the spectrum on campus. And they made an offer to Brock Knutson, who's an offensive lineman from Scotts Bluff. So another in-state scholarship offer for the 23 class goes out. He's going to take officials in June to Iowa State and Nebraska. So it sounds like that's the battle there. So, Nebraska's already got 5 guys in its 23 class. It's been a few weeks since they've added to it, but it's still far ahead of where they've been in past years, especially, the sort of COVID impacted recruiting cycles. And you think that they'll probably add more to it, and maybe quite a bit more to it by the time, say, like May's over and the official visit season really starts in June. One other thing, just quickly before we move on, and also today is Friday the 15th. It's 10:29 a.m. Sipple, and the coaching staff's out on the road. It's the first spring evaluation period since 2019. The last 2 have been called off because of the pandemic, and so they're going to be out. This is a time of year where coaches are essentially on the road for the better part of the next 6 weeks, all over the place, watching kids. They can go watch kids work out at schools. In some parts of the country, they're literally playing spring football, essentially 7-on-7. So it's a time where the coaches say, sayonara to the families and spend literally all week, pretty much every week, at least during the work week, on the road over the next few weeks. So a lot of evaluating and probably some shakeup in terms of recruiting boards and guys that are really interested in all of that in the coming weeks.
I would want to ask Baz a question. There's this sort of conundrum that popped up. A lot of questions about it this week. We mentioned this 100 plus recruits on hand. Trev talked about all these alumni on hand for the spring game. Yet the spring game has become this sort of puzzle. Like, what do you do with it? Right? What we've watched. We keep kind of alluding to what do you take away from it when they're playing, they're playing tag football in pads in the first half. I don't know. I don't have an easy answer to this. I don't know what you do. Do you keep calling it the red, white spring game and try to make as much a game as possible? Or maybe do you just say, hey, everybody, you can come watch it. We're not going to scrimmage, or we might scrimmage a little. We're going to have a practice. Or do you make it a fan fest or something in between all that?
Here's what I think you do. And you call it the red, white game because you need to market it. And look, they do it because they know they can put 50, 60, 70,000 people in the stands and charge them $10 a pop. You're basically getting another home game out of this deal. After they buy the tickets, you can do whatever the hell you want. You can have a scrimmage. You can play tag football.
Tucker them in, baby.
Let's just be real about it. Like, I mean, you're not letting fans come in for free. You're not just holding this out of the kindness of your heart. You're charging them money to come in, and you're charging them for concessions when they get there. Like they're using this as a money-making venture. And that's a lot of what it's become. It's a recruiting day, obviously. And it's also a chance for the athletic department to make $1 million, basically, so, and it's at the end of spring ball. Look, you're never going to have your top guys go out there and play full on tackle. Now, well, Ohio State's doing it this year, but they got a little different story on the depth side of it than Nebraska does. But like, what are you going to do? You're going to go out and play a full tackle football game in your last spring practice of the year? Especially this year, if you're Scott Frost, and you need to keep those guys healthy. Like, I get it. And I get that we need stuff that we need, like in our profession, we need stuff that to take away, stuff to analyze and things like that. And the fans want to see what guys like. They want to see Casey Thompson throw more than 4 passes or whatever. I get all that. But look, I mean, the reality of it is Nebraska's making a lot of money doing this thing, how they're doing it, and they're getting a lot of recruits on campus doing it, how they're doing it. Once you get in the stadium, you do whatever you want, I think.
Bass, they did used to play.
I know. Yeah, I know. Yeah.
There was a time where they lined up and played. Now, it was another time in the program. So there's that reality that you have to deal with. It's not the same. It's not the same program. And it's not the same world either. So so again, it's sort of, and now you say we got to be real about it. Well, being real about it's not calling it the red, white spring game if that's not what you're going to do. So I don't know if you keep calling it that. But you still, I think you do, comes back to the recruiting element. You can point to those 55,000 people and say, this is unique. Well, if you're going to keep doing that, you got to make it so it is worth coming to,
Yeah.
And there was a lot of people, we were standing up there after that, or we were sitting up there covering it and going, man, what are we doing here? Like, what is this?
It's interesting. I don't know that there's anything necessarily wrong, like with the way that they've done it the last 2 years, but it does feel a little bit like they're stuck in between having it be a game, exactly right. Like a football and an entertainment event. And I just wonder, like it feels like the ultimate sort of inevitable conclusion is if you're not going to go back to having it be more about football, then is it going to tilt more toward entertainment? And I don't know if it's ever going to be like opening night in basketball where you've got a musical, like a music event in coordination with that. I don't think that's necessarily impossible. But they don't really do any of the, like, some places, they have the offensive linemen have a punt catching competition, or they, there's a field goal shootout now Nebraska doesn't have its full complement of field goal kickers, and maybe that wouldn't have been all that pretty this year. The kicking wasn't great on Saturday, but just there's some of that stuff that's like sometimes you jazz it up and it's just sort of goofy stuff. And that doesn't really seem to be Frost's MO. Like that would never be what Scott would sort of like draw up as like, here's what we're going to do. But
bring a cat out of the tunnel.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It sort of seems like eventually it's going to go more toward one direction or more toward the other. And the entertainment value just seems like the more likely proposition than having it look more like a real football game in the future.
Stuck in the middle. Thank you. That's a great
Steelers Wheel. Great song. Stuck in the Middle with You. Yeah.
Yeah. That is a good song. Yeah.
I know.
I think it's Steelers, or is that Steelers wheel? Yeah, it is.
Yeah, Steelers wheel. Yep, I just looked it up.
Nice job.
All right, there's your music.
Stuck in the middle. Okay.
Yeah, all right, should we wrap this up with a little baseball talk?
Yeah. How many people were at the game last night? Nebraska beats BYU Friday night 1-0. How many people were there?
Thursday night, 1-0, one hitter. Nebraska had 3 hits. I would guess 1,000 people or less. It was not a very good crowd. It was a little weird. It's Thursday night game, which is a little off. It's not conference. It's not a real familiar opponent. They haven't played BYU in several years. But yeah, the crowd, the berms in the outfield were virtually empty. The left field berm had like 2 people sitting on a blanket out there. There just weren't many people there. So, and it wasn't terrible. I mean, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't like it was warm or anything like that. So yeah, crowd wasn't great. Got a 13 and 18 baseball team now, playing a 17 and 12 baseball team. So that's just where they're at. They're not playing well now. They played well last night. Cody Frank was great on the mound, and they got what they needed to offensively in the 7th inning and got it done. But yeah, I mean, I put this in my story. I tweeted it last night. They've scored 2 runs their last 2 games. They have 5 total hits. And they're 1-1. They've been outscored 20-2 the last 2 games, and they've won 1 and lost 1. So they're just in a weird spot right now. The Rutgers series was weird. They were kind of in it the first 2 games and just a total blowout on Sunday. 6 games below 500 for the first time in 8 years. They've had a few games this year. We've had to go digging through the record books to look up, worst loss since whenever, or most runs given up since whenever. So it's just, it's kind of strange to watch, especially with a Will Bolt coach team. Like you wouldn't expect losses like that. But they've happened. And whether that's the effect of those guys moving on after last year that moved on, and maybe that's affected them more than we thought it would. That's probably part of it. Maybe it's young guys struggling to adjust. I don't know. They've certainly had some injuries in the pitching staff, and they certainly have had some guys that haven't hit like they thought they would. But yeah, it's just it hasn't quite clicked yet for Nebraska, and that's how you get to 13 and 18 halfway through the year.
We're about halfway through the season. Where would the spark come from if they're going to make a pretty major turnaround and push for the upper division, finish in the Big Ten? Where would it come from that you see? What's most likely?
Boy, that's a great question. They got to find something on offense, and whether that's Max Anderson getting going and Bryce Matthews getting going, like they're not consistent enough on offense right now, and it affects everything else. It affects their pitching staff because the pitching staff feels like they have to be more perfect. That affects the defense because the defense has to be perfect. They have to find a spark there somehow. And look, you got a clutch hit from Nick Wimmers last night to win that game. You've had some walk-off hits this year, so you know that it's in there for this team, but they just have to find some consistency. They strike out a ton with runners on base and runners in scoring position. Can you just start putting the ball in play? More consistency, and that's weird to say halfway through the season. But that's what it is. Even the Creighton game the other night that got postponed, the bases loaded, 1 out and struck out twice back to back. They didn't even put the ball in. It's stuff like that. So if they can find a way to just get that going, and look, in the Big Ten, they might be able to. Big Ten's not very good this year. I think Rutgers is pretty good. I think Maryland's pretty good. Outside of that, there's nothing there that really scares you, I don't think, if you're Nebraska. So they could do this because the level of competition they're going to face isn't going to be real good. So they're going to have some opportunities. We saw what they did at Ohio State a couple of weeks ago. They're going to have some opportunities to do that. Now, can you do it on a consistent basis, weekend to weekend, and build some momentum? I think if you can do it a couple of weekends in a row, they're going to build some confidence, and that's really going to help them more than anything.
That is, yeah, the Big Ten.
It's terrible.
Probably is it?
It's terrible. They're the 9th ranked conference in the country in the RPI right now. Think about that. Okay. They're below the West Coast Conference. I think they're behind the Valley. They're just not very good. You're defending champs 13 and 18. Indiana's down. Michigan's down. Like the teams that have been at the top of that league are down this year.
Right. Now, here's the key. The critical discussion. And it's really interesting how this has swung. The Big Ten tournament in Omaha, Nebraska's got to finish in the top 8. I think they're tied for 7th right now. They got now the disaster is not reaching the tournament that you host. And I think Bolt, I mean, he stayed pretty upbeat, at least with his comments to the media. And I think he has to. You have to have that in the back of your mind. You got to do whatever you can to get your team to that tournament.
Well, and that's what he said. Outside of hosting a regional, he said all their goals are still intact. They can still win the league. They can still get the Big Ten tournament. If you win that, you're going to a regional. And it's like I said, that anybody can win that tournament at this point, from what I've seen. So yeah, it's not like the season is over by any means. Has it been disappointing? Yeah, absolutely, it's been disappointing. You talked before the season about wanting to host a regional, and that's out the window halfway through the year. There's no chance they're going to host a regional. So now it's about, okay, we can still win the league. We can still win the league tournament if we find a way to turn this thing around over the back half of the season. And look, you have a good weekend this weekend against BYU. You win 3 out of 4. Maybe you get all 4 of them. Beat North Dakota State in the midweek. All of a sudden, you're close to 500 again. You're going and playing an Indiana team that hasn't been great. So
bottom of the Big Ten.
Yeah, there's going to be plenty of opportunities there for Nebraska to turn this thing around, just because the strength of the schedule that they're going to play is not going to be very good.
All right, so you got a game tonight. Oh,
two games
double
2 p.m., 5:30 p.m. double header. Then they'll play one game Saturday. They don't play on Sunday, of course, because it's Easter, and BYU doesn't compete on Sundays, so they'll wrap it up Sunday afternoon.
Okay, well, take Easter off.
Hey, thanks. I might.
Paint some eggs.
I don't even know.
Don't you do that?
We probably will this year. We got a little guy at home. He'll probably
a little guy. You should teach him how to do that.
Maybe we will. Maybe we'll do that.
Palmer's just like a prodigious egg painter.
Yeah, it turns out it's like Fabergé. It's like Fabergé egg art, like weirdly, like just right out of the chute.
Palmer Picasso.
Yeah, Plumcasso. All right, guys. Okay. Let's wrap this baby up. It's starting to get weird. Thanks for tuning in. We'll keep it nice and tidy for you. We'll talk to you next week. Thanks for watching.